Good morning, sixth graders. Today we're going to continue our little odyssey and learn more about these level one and level two questions. Uh, Before I get to that, I just want to run through kind of the order of operations for today. We're gonna watch this PowerPoint or this slideshow, talk more about level one and level two questions, and at the end of this, you're going to need your worksheet from last Friday. I'll show you a picture of what that worksheet looked like. It should be in your yellow folder. What you're going to do is you're going to add one question to that list, which you're going to answer. And after all it's done, it shouldn't take you all that long. I've given you a little website which gives you some information that you just need to browse or review about the state of Minnesota. It's kind of a fun little visual to remind you of what's so great about our state. So I call this level one versus level two questions, the showdown, the Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Um, it's not really a battle between level one and level two questions. It's just that we're kind of comparing them and seeing how they're different. But I just like this graphic anyway. So, whenever we learn a new concept in social studies or science or reading a language, every teacher always gives you what's called the basic information about that event or concept or subject. Mrs. Shipples yesterday talked about giving you lots of information up front, basic information about that. So if we're studying the Revolutionary War, we would talk about who was involved, where the major battles were, who won this battle, how many soldiers died, and finally, what did these battles do for our country? That's basic information. And we have to have that information in order to do more with it later on. But we don't want to live our whole lives in that basic information. We want to continue to think more deeply about that as we get that basic information. So I think of level one information like a thin sandwich, like right here. Okay? It gives you the basics, but there's really not a whole lot to it. There's not a lot of extras involved. There's not a lot of thinking. You have the peanut butter and jelly, and that's about it. Okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with these questions, but we want to think a little more deeply about some things. That's where level two questions come in. I think of a level two question like this, like a Denver Mile High sandwich, like thick, like a meal in a sandwich. When you answer a level two question, when you think on that level two level, it gives you way more, you get way more information. And the answers to those questions are always much, much more complicated, and they're always longer. 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 sentences, maybe a whole paragraph to answer one question. And for some of you, you're probably freaking out thinking, oh my gosh, if I have 10 of those questions on a test, I'll never get done. Ordinarily, we just have a couple, maybe 2 or 3 type level one questions in a test, just to see if you really truly understand the material and if you can think deeply about it. Right? So when I look at level two questions, these are the kind of words that jump out at me. When I see a level question that starts with discuss, or explain, or analyze, compare and contrast, or even infer, I know that that question is going to require me to really know the material, to dig in, and then to give an answer that's going to be sentences, multiple sentences. Like I said, 3, 4, or 5 sentences. And I'm going to need information to feed into these questions. Now, this is where level one and level two questions kind of come together. Level two question, you take information, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, which is the basic level one information, and then you use it in your level two answers. Okay? So here's a great example. Explain how the weather in Florida is different, how different than the weather in Minnesota. So to answer this question, first of all, explain should jump right out at you. And then looking at the question itself, you're going to need information about the weather in Florida and about the weather in Minnesota. Now, anecdotal information is okay on this one because common sense would tell us that Florida weather is much, much warmer. than Minnesota weather, especially in the winter. And so you can use that basic information and start to formulate your answer. You could say something like, the weather in Florida is much different than the weather in Minnesota, especially in the winter. The average high temperature in Florida in January is 72 degrees versus 26 degrees in Minnesota. And by doing that, we can tell that you have thought about this, that you've understood that weather in Minnesota is colder, and that you've understood that weather in Florida is warmer, and you've put the two together as an answer. Now, this is a complicated process for some of you, and I understand that. You're used to looking in the book, finding the answer, turning it around, using RAD, and then putting it into your answer blank. And that's fine. You still need to do that. But I want to push you to think more deeply about the information that you get. And in doing so, I want you to be able to answer these level 2 type of questions. So here's the next step. Last Friday, you received a worksheet like this. It had a 2-paragraph little story on there, I'll call it, about just the general geography and history of Minnesota. Right? And on that questionnaire, that worksheet, there was 5 questions: who, what, when, where, and why. And you had to construct questions that started with who based on information in this reading. You had to construct questions that started with what based on the information in this reading, and so on and so forth. Some of you flew through this, others of you struggled mightily. Once again, that's okay. You could take this time if you wish, if you didn't finish, to go back, and it's important that you get all these filled in. Now, to kind of wrap this up today, I would like you to do the following. And there's a space below number 5 here. And what you're going to do is you're going to add this question right here. You're going to add this question that says, you're going to write it out, in fact, explain how glaciers changed the landscape of Minnesota 10,000 years ago. You're going to write that right here. And you're going to answer it. Now, there's information about glaciers in this first paragraph. There's information about glaciers in the second paragraph. There's even more information about glaciers from yesterday's reading. So you have information. You need to answer this question right here. Explain how glaciers change the landscape of Minnesota by writing it down here. And then a 2-sentence answer is minimum. There's a lot of things that you could say about glaciers and how they change the landscape of Minnesota. I'm not going to give you the answers. I want to see what you produce. So 2 sentences minimum. 2 complete sentences minimum. And use the RAD method to get yourself started. So you go ahead and do that. When you're complete with this, please listen carefully, teachers and students. When you're complete with this, make sure your name is on it and give it to your teacher. I will come around and collect it from your teachers later on in the day. After social studies is done, you should easily be able to get this done in social studies. And then I will look at them and give you some feedback and information on these. So once you've handed that in to your teacher, then the next thing you need to do is go to Google Classroom for today. And if you go, excuse me here, if you go to the 15th, which is today, and click on that, it spells out what you're doing. And then there's a link down here. And if you open this link, it's kind of cool. It's a PDF, and it's 4 pages just chock full of information about Minnesota, what I would call level 1 trivia. And I just want you to go through this and familiarize yourself with it. You don't have to read it all. I mean, it's eye-catching. There's lots of trivia and facts in here, but just go through the pages. It talks about just the basics of the state, what I would call the measurements of our state. Then it talks about water and how important that is to our state. It talks about the first Minnesotans, where they came from, and we'll get more of that this next week. It talks about our climate, what we do in the winter, what we do in the summer, how much rainfall and snow we get, some of the state symbols, the businesses and industries that bring people to our state to live. Agriculture, kind of near and dear to my heart. Minnesota is a farming state at its core, right? And then some famous Minnesotans here, people who have gone and done amazing things, and they're from our state. They were born in our state. And then finally, lastly, some places that you may have visited in some of your travels. The Wolf Center in Ely, Voyagers National Park, Mill City Museum. You guys went there, I believe, in fourth grade or third grade. Just run through these and say, oh, I remember that. Okay. I'm not asking you to remember anything through here. Just take 5 minutes and browse through it. After you're done browsing this, if there's still time left in social studies, you can work on the Big Five assignment, the states and capitals. Ideally, I would like all of you to be proficient at the states and capitals by MEA break, which I believe is in the middle of October. I don't have an exact date. Doesn't really matter at this point, but I'm going to expect you in 10 minutes to be able to go through the states and capitals and be able to get those correct. So practice that if you're done. If there's any questions, go ahead and ask your classroom teacher. But remember, I need that worksheet with that added question from you by the end of the hour.